I think if you are struggling and you're a boss mom, I think number one, just step back. I think before you try to figure out, oh, I need to do chips at home because Chrystie said it, or I need to have this like meal plan. I got to go buy all these sheet protectors. I think you need to step back and assess what works for you. What works for you? What are your strengths? What works for you at work or how you show up for yourself at work, and figure out if there's a way to capitalize that and translate that in your home structure.
In the midst of the pandemic, how can a boss mama use best practices from teaching thousands of kids across the country to her own kids and bring peace and balance at home? Today, we're talking with Chrystie Edwards about her boss mama journey. While a student at UCLA, she was diagnosed with ADHD, and that's where she started creating structures. Those structures actually even help her today thrive as a boss mama, as a teacher, education leader, and as a mom. Chrystie's in her 14th year in education, and she's a self-proclaimed teacher nerd. She was a teacher, a school leader. She led academics for 20 charter schools in California, Tennessee, and Texas. Now she's a partner at TNTP, a consulting firm that helps schools and teachers across the country. Chrystie is also African-American, the mama of 2 boys, and lives in Memphis, Tennessee. One of the boss mama strategies is about simplify to success. Chrystie shares how she simplifies to success by using her super strength of systems and structure, not just for her work, but her personal life. She'll share specific tactics about how she took best practices for what works with thousands of students across the country to her own home. Let's learn more from this boss mama. Chrystie, I'm so excited to be talking with you today. And I actually want to kick it off talking about Enneagrams. You are quite obsessed with them, so I figure we'll share with the audience, what are Enneagrams and why are you so obsessed with them?
I think I've always been into personality tests. It's just something I liked. As a kid, I was like, ooh, horoscopes, this is really cool. Learning about myself, learning about how I interact with different people. And so Enneagrams is just another variation of a personality test where you're ascribed a number, 1 through 9, based on just your motivations, your strengths, your challenges, your likes, your dislikes. It's not a perfect science, but I did fall into it listening to another blogger mom, and I just got really immersed. It was very interesting. It helped me understand how and why I move in the world in the way that I do, how I interact with others at work, at home, and really just help give a frame for relational context in terms of, oh, this is why I responded the way that I do. It's definitely not a excuse for behaviors. I think some people are like, oh, well, I'm this way because I'm a 3 or I'm a 4. I think what it does is it increases my self-awareness for how I move throughout the world.
That's so great. So I will include for our audience a link to a free Enneagram test. With that, though, Chrystie, I'd love for you to share, what is your number for Enneagram, and what does that tell us for your career path? Like, were you, always like that from the beginning? Had you, in terms of your career, had you planned on, what was your dream when you were a young Chrystie?
That's a great question. I am an Enneagram 3, which, if you know Enneagrams, I don't think it will surprise anyone that I ended up being a boss mom. I feel like Enneagrams, often your core motivations fall back on childhood. Everything I feel like is reduced to what happened in your childhood. And I was a high achiever from the start. I have a very close relationship with my dad, who had extremely high expectations for my brother and I at home, for academics, for sports. And there are just some isms from my dad that I internalized as a kid. It's almost like Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last type of motivation. In some ways, I feel like I was brought up to be the best in every sense of the word. So don't bring home any Bs. Don't bring home anything less than perfect, whatever perfect looks like. And that had some pros and cons. And I feel like that influenced and made me question once I got older and once I got to college, that aspect of my identity. I internalized, oh, I must be perfect, or I must be this high achiever, or I must have an affect and be very aware of how I move throughout the world so that it's impressive to others. When I was young, I wanted to be a pediatrician or an orthopedic surgeon. It was always, high achieving in math and science. And I feel like falling into education, I still kept that expectation of, okay, what are the roles in education I can take on that have a greater impact on my world around me, where I'm respected and it's, my contributions are valued.
Great. I love that you moved from I'm an achiever and you achieved your way through life and through education. I mean, you went from being a teacher to school leader, impacting 20 schools and leading academics, and now you're a partner at TNTP. So I'm curious, Chrystie, on this journey, right? You said there's like a bright side and there's also a dark side to having this like achieving personality. I'm curious, was there a, like a rock bottom moment or moment of like, whoa, I need to change direction? Tell us about that.
When it comes to Enneagrams, there's a healthy place and an unhealthy place. And the goal is to find your balance in between and what that looks like. And so in college, I went to UCLA and I was prepared in some aspects, but definitely was not prepared in some aspects. My schooling, I went to public school. I was bused out of the inner city to go to schools based on my test scores in LA. So my neighborhood schools were pretty underachieving. And then I had the opportunity to get bused out to go to higher performing, higher achieving schools. And in some aspects, I had success and I didn't have to study much. Things came very easily to me, very natural. But when I got to college, I think that was the beginning of me questioning my identity. And everything up to that moment, the achiever is who I was. It was who I was supposed to be. So when I found myself on academic probation, in danger of being kicked out of college, I questioned a lot. I questioned who I am. Was I supposed to be here? Did they make a mistake in admissions? And I found myself really struggling with depression. I found myself needing to seek some answers and seek some help. And so I ended up going to student services with the hope of just, can I talk to someone? Where should I do? What is going to happen next? And long story short, I ended up getting counseling and coincidentally being diagnosed with ADHD. And I was very confused. How can I have ADHD? I don't fit the typical ADHD profile, but come find out, many students and children who are high gifted, high achieving, move through the world in a certain way are often diagnosed with ADHD. And at that point, I thought all my systems, all my structures were working for me up until I got to college. And that's where I feel like I was exposed in a lot of ways. And I still struggled throughout. I ended up graduating, but I still had some challenges that I couldn't quite figure out. I couldn't quite figure out, why wasn't I being successful? What was going on with my time management? What was happening with how I spent my time outside of classes? Why was I finding it challenging to just sit down and study and focus? I chose not to stay medicated. I had some issues just responding to the medication. The side effects weren't worth, I felt like, trying to find the right dosage for medicine for me. And so I focused really hard and intently on just self-development. I read every book under the sun, and just seeking out different ways to navigate that. And I think through my first years as a teacher, I was very intentional in supporting my students in Watts and Compton area in California on what systems and structures to help them be successful so that they feel prepared for, whatever they faced outside of that setting, that classroom setting. And I feel like as I moved through in my career and became a school leader, the challenges were very apparent that I need some type of structure. I need some type of consistency. At that time, my husband and I, we had just welcomed our first son into the world. My husband was a school leader, and we're talking about two school leaders in high pressure environments in inner city Los Angeles, living the dream in an apartment, traveling on the freeway, sitting about 45 minutes to 2 hours in traffic on a commute. And I feel like we had to create some structures. We had to create some systems to allow me to cope. And that has always been my default to help me navigate with ADHD. Like, okay, I need high structure, high systems. We came up with something called the grid. This is very embarrassing and crazy. Being the teachers at heart that we were, we created a physical whiteboard down to like the teacher painter's tape, the blue tape to divide out the sections. And we just wrote out what needs to get done. So it was like drop off, pick up, who's got bath time, what's for dinner, who's up for dinner, what do we want to do for date night, what are the big meetings where somebody's going to for work, and those kind of drove. And then we had Monday through Sunday, and just like dividing our time and being very intentional without eliminating like oh great, here's a decision I need to make, because that is where I am at my worst when I have my ADHD moments. And it's in that indecision of like, oh, what's for dinner, or who's going to pick up the kid, wait, don't let him be the last one at preschool. In those moments, I think it's when I really figured out how to navigate my challenges. And for me, the answer was togetherness and high structure to find opportunities for success.
I love that answer. Thank you, Chrystie, because it really maps back to how you had this moment, and it was like a hard moment, even as an achiever, seeing that, wow, I need a different sort of help. And not necessarily taking the medicated route. You found ways that actually worked with your strengths to move into a system that's not only with yourself, but with your partner, and to figure out how you take both work as a teacher and those systems with your students home with you, with your partner, with your two beautiful boys. I love that. And the Boss Mamas program, we often talk about simplify to success. And that doesn't mean, no longer can you do, your life and all the things that matter, that are fun. It actually means, how do you take the things in your life and get clear, like in general, here's how we move, here's in general as a family, how we make decisions, so that you're not like, what should we have? Should we have the green beans or the potatoes? Or
Exactly.
Should I pick up my kid early or late? Who's going to do that? And rather than have all those in the moment decisions, you're like, we mapped it out. And we can use that mapping for the next time.
Exactly.
So I love that so much. And so your examples, because you're a teacher and you obviously moved kids academically and social emotionally, and not just like one school, but like 20 schools. So I'm curious, Chrystie, for those boss mamas at home who are, don't have that many kids, can you give specific examples, almost like that whiteboard example, but like what else, like tangible things that you did, like, because it's beautiful. And I'm also a nerd at heart with loving systems. So tell us more.
Well, I think another kind of pivot in the road was COVID-19 and the quarantine impact of everyone at home, not just dad at home working, mom at home working, but both boys at home schooling. And in March 2020, initially both my boys had assignments, instructional things to do. And then the worst thing possible, school declared they were done. They just called the school year. I want to say that was mid-April or end of April. And there were some asynchronous, your kids can log into this website and do this. No. For my boys at the time, they were 10 and 7. And I felt like they just needed high structure. And so some of the things that were birthed out of this need for high structure, where everyone was going crazy in our home, we were all at each other's throats. It was cute in the beginning. It was, this is going to be 2 weeks. Let's watch some movies. Let's hang out. Let's really be intentional on the weekend. And that transitioned to mommy's recharging her batteries. Please don't come in the room. My boys would see me with a puzzle and a glass of wine. And they knew, okay, mommy needs some mommy time right now. And a couple of the structures that were born out of that were, I call it our little family meal plan for lunch, breakfast and lunch. When we were first quarantined, I was cooking 3 times a day. working full time, keeping an eye on what they were doing for school, trying to keep the house, whose shoes are these? Whose socks are these? And so I think I had it. I made a decision. I said, look, you get one hot meal from mom a day during the week, Monday through Friday. And, my boys are old enough where they can navigate the kitchen to a certain extent. And I created a menu, and it helped provide high structure to eliminate the choices, like what you were talking about. And what that looked like was breakfast. There was a column for must-haves. Those were the entrees. Like, you pick one, here are your options. These are your may-haves. These are the optional sides. And then, you have to have your vitamins. You have to have a fruit or yogurt or something. And it just made it very easy. I said, shout out to Panera. Who knew? In terms of that you pick two situation. And same thing for lunch. They had the list of entrees. There was sandwich, like a noodle bowl they could microwave, things that were very easy and did not require me to observe or facilitate or do for them. And same thing, it was okay, you have X amount of carrots or, bell peppers or whatever the vegetable was in the fridge. You have a fruit, and then you can get like a fruit snacks, a bag of chips, whatever. And that has still lived on. They've since returned to school in person, but our menu, when they get home from school, I'm usually on a call or wrapping up with a client, and I don't have to answer any questions because they know. They just go to the fridge. Okay, what's available option for today on the menu?
That's awesome. I especially love that you mentioned earlier that you bake in self-care time. You mentioned a puzzle and wine, which sounds fabulous. And everybody knows, like, it's mama time, and she needs to be undisturbed, not just when she works, but also when she takes care of herself. I love that. Meals and time for you. Chrystie, can you share one of the things that you mentioned that your husband does is he's also a school leader, and he focuses on emotional support for students. Can you talk about how you took some of those structures for schools and kiddos at schools to your home?
I think one of the things that we realized by being in such close quarters, figuratively during quarantine, was we didn't communicate with each other very well. After, I'd say, like the first 4 weeks, we found I was getting into it, little spats with my husband, where just the slightest thing would trigger an emotional response. And then I saw that same style of communication manifested in my kiddos. So that was kind of a red flag of, okay, let's pull back, let's examine what's happening, what's the structure, let's reassess. At that point, I had decided to put everyone in therapy. I had a therapist. We are very pro mental health in our household. And so even through COVID, my boys were able to log in virtually, separately with their therapist. They had the same therapist. She was she just knew how to speak their language and empowered them with some tools and structures and communication to say things. The youngest would say things to his oldest brother. I am feeling like you violated my boundary. I needed to be in my room alone, and you came in here. I asked you not to come in here. You played with my Legos, and it made me feel very angry. And for the first time, we saw our boys naming their emotions. It was something that wasn't a part of my household culture growing up, that children had that space to name how they felt. My husband and I grew up in the children should be seen, not heard type of households. And I think we really dug in and leveraged his expertise as a behavior consultant and pulling in some social emotional language where it was easy to understand for kids. So we have sheet protectors all over our house. If anybody comes by to visit, they would probably think I'm crazy. But we have a chart where it's our feelings. And there's one chart that says, what are your feelings trying to tell you? And there is no, you should feel one way. You feel the way you feel, and that's okay. But there's a chart and it says, anger may be telling you that a boundary has been violated, or happiness is telling you something else. And we reference a chart sometimes when we find that the boys are, withdrawn and introspective, and maybe they're choosing not to communicate or they don't know how. And that could have been driven by something that we as their parents have done intentionally, unintentionally. We miss it too, or something, externally, something happened on Zoom when they were in quarantine, in virtual school, or maybe something happened with one of their friends. And so we have pictures of, there's like different emojis that if you can't name your emotion, but you can identify with a face. You see like an angry face and it's like, I may be feeling frustrated. And then what does being frustrated tell you about? So I think it's small things like that that really have helped us to be better at communicating. I mean, don't get me wrong, they still yell at each other and get out of my room. What are you doing? There are still those moments. But I feel like we're trying to be very intentional in how we integrate that social emotional into our household.
Fabulous. I will ask you for those charts because I feel like that would really help not just my kids, but me. I'm feeling angry, a boundary is crossed, like checking in with your feelings. Your feelings are telling us stuff. So what is it telling us? That's beautiful. I love just how you integrate just the importance of mental fitness for yourself, your family, and how that's also now in the language of how you talk with each other. It's like a life skill. Like, where did we learn that when we were kids? I don't know if we ever learned. I did not learn that as a kid.
It definitely was not a thing in the 80s.
So this is beautiful. And one of the things I wonder is, as you move through, simplification, because it feels like you've simplified, right? Like, what are the decisions that we can make now that we can use going forward? And let's cut out the rest. I'm curious if there were things that what did you cut out? Because it's not just like here's the new charts, but there are things you also cut out. So can you share things that you might have cut out and whether you missed those things?
Yeah, I think one of the things we cut out was having to make the judgment calls in the moment of permission, right? Like, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? When both of us are in between calls with clients, working from a virtual context, and the kids are home, whether it's last year and they were doing virtual school, or they come home and they want to have permission to do something. Can I play with the neighbors? Can I do this? We are very intentional about choices and resulting consequence. And consequence is not a bad word in our home. You can have a positive consequence or a negative consequence, but you have to have ownership over what led to those consequences. And we have a chip system in our house, red chip, blue chip. With the youngest, the oldest is in 6th grade. He's graduated from the chips. But with the youngest, we have a chip system. And what that means is they have a checklist in the morning. And so one of the things I eliminated was the pressure from myself of having to be morning mom. Let me tell you, morning mom, she was not cute. She was angry. She was irritated. She was always yelling, where are your shoes? Get your stuff. Where's your iPad? What is your... I mean, the nagging, my poor kids. And so by giving them agency and giving them their own checklist, it's same thing every morning, feed the dog, brush your teeth, brush your hair, do your hygiene, and everything else that goes with getting ready, whatever that looks like in the morning. And they have check-in meetings with us. So there's really only 1, maybe 2 touch points where I have to engage with them. I know that in the morning, I'm getting ready for work, or I may have already started work, and that transition was just not successful. Like, I wasn't my best self with them and how I communicated that stress. Same thing for my husband. And so one of us will own kind of a morning meeting check-in. And so we go through the checklist. Did you make your bed? Did you do this? For everything they did, they get a blue chip. For everything they did not do, or if they had to be told more than once, then it's like a red chip. So fast forward to, do I have permission to do something? Can I watch TV? Well, pull for it. And so there's kind of a created motivation system where, oh, I need to do the right thing because I know the consequence for that is either being allowed to do something that I want to do or not being allowed to do something. So something is small. I got ambushed last week by the youngest who said, Mom, can I bring $1 to the bookstore? I've really been having good behavior in saving. And I said, pull for it. And he just looked at me like, oh, pull for this too? I thought it was just for screens. And I said, no, I mean, either you earned it or you didn't. And if you didn't, that's okay. We'll just keep trying to, complement that with red chips. And sometimes, my kids have their days where with the youngest, he may have earned like 5 red chips in the morning because he was just dragging, like, go get your stuff. Let's go. But it reduces the negative and the super emotional that I felt like was translating to them. And I saw it manifesting in how, just the stress. I don't want to send them off to school super stressed where it's like, did you do this? Okay, well, blue chip. Did you not do it? Okay, red chip. And don't get me wrong, I still get emotional sometimes, but the chips help take that angst away and it just kind of neutralizes. So it's not like you're a bad kid. You just chose not to do what you were supposed to do. So here you go. Here's the red chip. Maybe when we pull, we'll pull a blue chip. Maybe not. It's up to you. You have the choice of, the ratio of blue to red. And that kind of impacts at the end of the week. We take all the chips out and it determines, do you get like a little extra commission on allowance if you maintain your ratio of red to blue? Like we try to have fun with it when we can.
Oh my gosh, Chrystie, I'm taking notes for myself. I love that you noticed in the morning, you're like, this is not my best rainbow bright self in the morning.
Not at all.
And we need to change the way that we're operating. So how can we make this morning ritual one that is peaceful, where people are incentivized to do the right thing? And I often feel like a nag, right? Like, come on,
Yes.
partner, come on, kids. And like, who wants to be around that? I don't want to be a nag, and they don't want to be nagged. So how do you set up the system?
And I feel like the agency that's embedded in that, because one of the things we're also aware of is like, oh my gosh, have we overstructured them? Like, what are they going to do when they get out in the world and they're on their own and there are no red chips, blue chips? I think what it does is it makes it less, I'm doing it for mom and dad, or I'm doing it because my parents said so, to I'm doing it because I want to. And right now, he's young enough where that little external motivation, internal motivation balance works for him, but hopefully those habits will become internalized in the future. Hopefully.
I definitely think that, because consequences are hard to teach when you're 5, right? Like, why do I have to go and get my stuff ready? Like, what's the big deal about being late? Like, they don't see it. So now they get a chip to say, hey, actually it does matter, because the next time you want to get on your iPad, these chips will determine whether or not you get
exactly.
I love it. So let's go with tips. So if you're a mom, right, and you're just like, I'm overwhelmed, there's so much, the pandemic keeps going. Like, what kind of tips would you share with other mamas out there to say, here's things I'd consider? Because this is a lot, right, Chrystie? You're throwing a lot, like PhD level structure. So how would you just, what are the things that you have people consider, moms at home?
I think it is a lot. And I think that moms have so much on their plate, whether it's just the expectation of everyone in their household, or it's just that internal motivation of just wanting to nurture and take care of everyone. I think if you are struggling and you're a boss mom, I think number one, just step back. I think before you try to figure out, oh, I need to do chips at home because Chrystie said it, or I need to have this like meal plan, I got to go buy all these sheet protectors. I think you need to step back and assess what works for you. What works for you? What are your strengths? What works for you at work, or how you show up for yourself at work, and figure out if there's a way to capitalize that and translate that in your home structure. Maybe you're low structure and your kids need high structure. Where's the balance? Where can you find that opportunity to kind of merge? I know that my husband and I are high structure. I have one kiddo that's really high structure and one that's like, can we just not? You are so extra. But that's okay. And I think just finding that balance. So number one, I would say, is do an authentic assessment, because we can be so overwhelmed, and the world right now is just overwhelming, everything about it. And I think taking time to identify what influences how you show up when you feel like you're your best version of boss mom, when you're your best version of being a partner to, someone in your home, if you have a partner, or being a great daughter or son or whatever. And take that and go, was that because I actually had alone time and could take a shower without some little person coming in bothering me? Was that because I gave myself a facial, or I had a glass of wine and I could watch my favorite show? Just trying to think through, when are you your best version of yourself, and how do you get there, and kind of plan backwards.
That's great. I wanted to highlight that it's about knowing yourself. And not saying, oh, shoot, I'm not structured and therefore I'm bad. But actually saying, oh, here's how I am naturally, embracing your authentic self, and saying, how can I rock that? Not just probably at work, which is where we often rock our strengths, but how can we do that at all facets of our life? And so I love that. So good. So, with that, I wanted to do some lightning round questions. All right.
Okay,
So,
let's
here
do
we
it.
go. Chocolate or vanilla?
Oh, vanilla all day.
Cooking or takeout?
Take out.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
So I would say neither, but climb a mountain. Heights are.
Have you ever worn socks with sandals?
That is blasphemy. I'm from LA. We do not do that.
How would you rate your karaoke skills on a scale of 1 to 10 being Mariah Carey?
Oh, girl. A 2 probably. I have an excellent shower voice. Just don't put me in front of other people.
What's a recent book you read?
Ooh, a recent book. I think, well, I'm in the progress of, it's a book by Levi Ajayi and Professional Troublemaker. That's what it is. All about embracing just your inner badass. It's all about, overcoming your fear and what that looks like and how it manifests in your life.
What is your favorite way to practice self-care?
Having alone time is important. As an Enneagram 3, I think I move through the world just very humming all along. And I think that time to like, whoa, slow down, just be by myself for a minute is a great way for me to reset.
What is one really good professional development you've done?
Best professional development, hands down, in my life has been with Maya Hiker Merlin, and that was with the Together Leader. Hands down, the most transformational PD. It had nothing to do with like content, all about knowing yourself. What are some possible ways to organize yourself and structure yourself?
And what is your definition of a boss mama?
Oh, I feel like this word is so loosely used in the world now. I think for me, a boss mom doesn't necessarily indicate your executive status at work. I think it's a mom who is doing it all, who is balancing home life, work life, trying to move through the world and make an impact for herself and her family.
And what advice would you give your younger self, your young Chrystie?
So many things. I think I would say slow down and identify those inner feelings, that inner voice. Don't try to people please. Know what works for you and yourself.
And then where can we find you, like LinkedIn or anything like that?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on Facebook. It was just, Facebook is too much, y'all. I'm on Instagram at just_Chris. So JUST_CHRYS. And I post random things, family, dogs, all the good stuff, kids.
And then our last question, Chrystie, is do you have a final ask or a recommendation or any parting thoughts for our audience?
I think find your tribe. I think boss moms are often isolated from other female relationships. And it's not about the stay-at-home war versus the working mom war. It's you don't have to do this all on your own, and find people who you connect with. I did not value female friendships and relationships when I was younger, but the older I am, I don't have any sisters. And so my friends are truly, truly everything to me. And it's just so important to have somebody that you can cry with, laugh with, vent to. It's a form of self-care, and it strengthens you as a mom and a boss.
Great. Thank you, Chrystie, so much for being here. I learned a ton, and I know everyone else did, so really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.